Faith in Leesburg, Florida. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine.
Pretty good.
Thanks
What do you
for
got
calling.
for us?
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm a theist, and I wondered if you believe that Jesus actually existed.
So I don't know, is my answer. I don't have a big problem with the idea that there may be some real person at the core of this. There's been a lot of scholarly debate on the subject in recent years. I have a friend, Richard Carrier, who's going to be releasing a book that uses Bayesian analysis of history to try and give us a better answer, try and calculate the probability that he actually existed. I'm far less concerned with that because even if he did exist and this was real, we still then have to say, okay, how accurate is the record of his supposed words and deeds? And then we have the question of, well, was he actually a god? You know, are these things that he said, even if we have them accurately, are they then true? So it's layers upon layers. And the only reason, you know, for example, if you look back at like Socrates and Plato, does it matter if they existed? Because their words stand and fall on their own merit. And that should be true for anybody and anything. And the only reason that this is different is because if he didn't exist, then the claims that, of course, he was God fall away right off the bat. So that's the only reason why it's really important whether or not he actually existed.
Yeah. Well, now also, you know, he was crucified and rose from the dead, and hundreds of people saw him after he raised from the dead.
How do you prove that?
Yes, that's a problem because the source, again, we get back to sourcing your historical materials, right? You know,
Right.
what you have a particular passage in a holy book that makes claims about what eyewitnesses saw, what eyewitnesses didn't see, but what sort of verification can we apply to any of that? It doesn't seem like there's much.
The analogy that I've used before on this is there are living, breathing people right now that you can go talk to who will tell you about their alien abduction story. I mean, this is happening now and has been happening for years. People are coming forward saying, this happened to me. And you can actually talk to them and interview them. I don't believe that they've actually been abducted by aliens. Most people don't. And yet, if you take that story and move it back 2,000 years to where now we can no longer talk to these people at all, and all we have is anonymous hearsay accounts, how does that make the story more believable? To me, it makes it even less believable. So if I don't have a good reason to think that people that I've actually could meet and talk to have been abducted by aliens, then I certainly don't have a good reason to believe an anonymous account of a bunch of unnamed people that we can't talk to claiming to have seen somebody rise from the dead.
And it is an extraordinary claim, too. I mean, we're talking about, the basic question is, what is more reasonable to believe given the evidence we have? That at this point in history, one human body did something that no human body had ever done before or has ever done since, or that that these are stories about a possibly a possible actual historical figure, but that were then later on mythologized, fictionalized, mythicized, which is a thing that happened back then. We do know from reading other historical texts. I've read a lot of histories, for example, just ancient Roman histories written at the time, translations from the ancient texts, where the writers then were talking about popular beliefs concerning Roman emperors or Roman generals. The soldiers would actually believe in omens. You know, if an eagle flew over the camp or something like that, then they sincerely believed that this was the gods favoring their general and that the battle that day would go their way. So we know that people thought this way back then. They had these magical, mystical beliefs. It's not surprising that such stories, if Jesus was a figure who did some of the things that he has claimed to have done, that the people who believed in him and supported him would have just come up with such beliefs and tales themselves. That's not unusual. And it seems a much more plausible explanation than, no, a dead body actually came back to life.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're saying. I don't agree. I believe that he really was crucified and did raise from the dead. But I wanted to point out today was Epiphany, and the first reading was from Isaiah, which talked about the rulers of the earth will bring gold and frankincense. That was written 750 years before Christ's birth.
Are you talking about
the Messiah? Yeah.
Well,
all I'm saying is,
well,
it
actually,
was written 750 years before Christ's birth.
Just a second, Faith, hang on, just a second.
Actually, the Jews don't agree with you that that was written about the Messiah or that it was fulfilled. So, you say you disagree and that you believe he actually, was crucified and died and rose again. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering why you actually believe it, because the why is the important part. It's probably more important than what you actually believe.
Okay, do you believe that the Holocaust really existed?
Yes.
Okay, there are people that we come from Chicago, and there's a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago who wrote about how the Holocaust never happened.
Yes,
that was just all made up.
There are Holocaust deniers. Unfortunately for them, we have a really good record, including survivors that rebut that.
Yes, and you have all the survivors
that you can talk to.
Wait! You have the followers of Christ and their successors, and
no, you
on
don't.
for. You have the.
You do realize the Gospels are anonymous, right? And that we can't go talk to any of those people, right?
Who cares who wrote them?
I would agree.
The point is that those exist, and the apostles of Christ had successors that continued on and wrote, the history, it's been going on for 2,000 years now.
Well, that's not evidence, that's anecdote. Yeah. That is, that you're basically saying that because this claim has been tenacious and lots of people have believed it, that it's believable, and that's simply false.
Well, again, and it comes back to the quality of evidence. Remember what I mentioned before. Holocaust deniers are going against a vast body of very easy to confirm evidence.
And by the way, the Holocaust, natural event, no appeals to the supernatural. It's very, very different from the idea that there was this person who lived and performed miracles that violate the natural order and then rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Then not all claims are the same. Some claims are extraordinary and require extraordinary evidence. Right. And by the way, if it turns out that there wasn't a Holocaust, that we have been duped by something, so what? My eternal life is not in any way dependent about whether or not I'm correct about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. See, it comes down to this. Let me try to put some of this in context, so maybe that you'll sort of understand where we're coming from on it. You get farther back in time, and so it becomes a bit more difficult to come up with things to confirm the historicity of something, right? The accuracy of an account of something. The farther you go back in time, it is more and more difficult to find reliable accounts. That's just the nature of that, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I'm researching a documentary about something that happened 130 years ago in Austin. Very difficult to find sources. The farther you go back, if I were to go back 300 or 400 years to some other, I would have a whole lot of work to do to find reliable sources. You're going back 2,000 years, again, much more difficult to find these reliable sources. Something that happened less than a century ago, when you have photographs and film footage and, actual survivors who are interviewed. Okay, that's a very strong body of good evidence for something that is not an extraordinary claim. I mean, for example, the Holocaust was extraordinary in terms of the degree of human cruelty that was going on, but it's not extraordinary in that no one is claiming any kind of supernatural or divine agency is involved in any of this. Whereas if you're talking about, again, a human being rising from the dead and becoming a sort of God-man, or having always been a God-man and fulfilling some kind of divine plan, you now have several millennia where we're actually separated from the supposed event, plus a real dearth of any historical document that isn't like directly from the holy book of the religion that is all about worshiping this holy man. You have an inability to find extra biblical documents that confirm any of these events. You have contradictions within the holy book themselves. Was there an earthquake? Yes, no. How many people turned up at the tomb? 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 20. The Gospels themselves are very inconsistent on how they talk about the resurrection, how they describe the events. So again, just to get to the facts of things, it's a whole heck of a lot more difficult. So, you can't just look at something that happened 50, 60, 70 years ago and say, this is on an equal footing of something that supposedly happened not only 2,000 years ago, but also had magic supposedly involved. And see, there's a degree of things, and it's a false equivalence to say.
And I'm going to let you respond in just a second. I just wanted one little thing that kind of dovetails onto what Martin was talking about. If we have a set standard of evidence for which that we use to determine whether or not a historical claim probably occurred or actually occurred, if we lower our standards of evidence to the point that the claims about Jesus are accepted, then we have no reason, no good reason, to reject the other claims of other miracle saviors or other religions. We just have to kind of take it all in. I mean, the Muslims would tell you that they have the original copy of their book and that they have a much better annotated history from the beginning of their religion until now than Christianity does. And so if we've lowered our standards of evidence so far that Jesus gets in and gets a pass on all the miracle stuff, then we'd be stuck believing everything, and we'd be believing contradictory things.
You know, the ancient Egyptians with all of their frescoes and their reliefs on their tomb walls, those are original documents, technically, but because they talk about, you know, the Book of the Dead and their pantheon and all that, should we consider them credible just on those grounds? No. I mean, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
And so
when I called last time, I was asking about the beginning of the universe, and they were talking about how it was a whole bunch of matter squeezed together, and then it just exploded, and that's how we've got our universe and our planets.
Well,
and what I'm saying is, matter does not. It remains stable. So
no,
that means that some force had to bring that little ball of matter into existence in the first place.
How did you determine that? I mean, first of all, your explanation. I don't want to pick it apart too much, and I'm not a physicist, and this is not a show about.
Well, I mean, that's what you guys told the guy that was a month ago, who was the host, said that the universe started with an extremely condensed ball of matter that exploded. We call that the Big Bang, and the universe is still exploding.
So we don't know the nature of all that. We can't look back beyond the Planck time, which is a slight fraction, the smallest fraction of a second that we can address after the event. What we do know is that it happened, or at least something happened, and the evidence for the Big Bang model seems strong. It could be that the Big Bang model is actually in error, but science stops at that point and says, you know what, right now we can't go any further than this. We have no mechanism to see behind, and so it's unknown. And yet you are asserting that there must have been something to cause this, and apparently, although I didn't let you actually get that far, you've concluded that the best explanation for this is God. And I don't know how anybody could say that God is the best explanation when it has no explanatory power. We explain things in terms of other things that we understand, and so trying to solve the biggest mystery in the universe by appealing to a bigger mystery, saying God did it is indistinguishable from saying it was magic. And until you can come up with a way to demonstrate the probability of a God existing that is capable of doing this, then your answer, God created the universe, is fundamentally the same as universe-creating pixies created the universe. They are two...
Yeah, but he revealed himself to the Jewish people, and
why does okay? You say that
throughout thousands of years. There,
you say that, but what's your evidence that he revealed himself to anybody ever?
It's in the Old Testament there.
Okay, what reason do you have to think that the Old Testament is true, and why has he stopped revealing himself?
Who said he stopped revealing himself? I see his work all the time.
Well, no, you see things that you attribute to God, but if God were actually still revealing himself, then we wouldn't be having these conversations about the origins of the universe or whether or not Jesus was a historical figure. It would be a settled issue if God was actually revealing himself.
I think that there would be no reason for faith if.
Why
God
do
was,
you need faith?
but God was revealing, as you just said, God.
If he was hitting himself over the head with his presence, there would be no need for faith.
What good is faith, and why is it important? What's wrong with God just revealing himself? He revealed himself supposedly, according to you, to the Jews.
Yeah, right.
So why can't he reveal himself to everybody else? Why are we required to accept it on worse evidence than those people?
Well, Christ was God in the flesh.
Well, okay.
That didn't answer the question, Faith.
My Uncle Bernie was also God in the flesh.
Yeah.
I mean, why is it okay for him to give clear, supposedly concrete evidence to one group of people thousands of years ago and not the rest of us?
See, there's an inconsistency in your argument, Faith. You first mentioned that, well, God revealed himself to the Jews, a direct revelation. You believe that's happened, and you have given that as your justification for believing that the Old Testament is valid. But when we ask, well, why doesn't God do his business in the same way today? You say, oh, well, God can't do that because then there would be no reason for faith. So why did the rules change suddenly? Why was eliminating the possibility for faith back then not a problem, but it is now for God? I mean, why would God change his agenda?
I really don't know, but that's a very good question. I like that, but it's not.
Just think about it.
Something I hadn't thought about before.
There's another aspect of this, and I'm not trying to paint you in a corner. Do you believe in the devil?
Oh yeah.
And the devil knows that God exists and lived in heaven for a while, was cast down, and all that.
Right.
So the devil has absolute confirmation that there is a God and has a good idea of exactly how powerful he is, and yet the devil was free to reject God. So as long as that's a possibility, then there can be no problem with God revealing himself to everybody, because we would all still be free to reject him, as I would.
That's a good point.
Thanks.
Okay. Well,
yeah, very good point. Yeah.
Well, think about some of this stuff and.
Yeah, and the last question that they had typed up, which I'm just going to hit real quick, and we're going to move on to some other callers, was your question about miracles, and it pretty much follows the same route of everything else we've been talking about. We don't have any scientific confirmation of miracles, despite what some people claim. If these things had been confirmed, they'd be front page news. They would be, Nobel Prize winning things. The Templeton Foundation wouldn't have to keep sending money to people to try to prove that prayer works, because they'd be the first ones saying, we've proved it. And yet, curiously, as our ability to investigate the world has increased, the reported supposed confirmation of miracles has decreased. And I find that rather curious, that the more we learn about the universe and how it works, the less God seems to be capable of or willing to do. And I go back to, if a Damascus Road appearance and experience was good enough for Saul, then it should be good enough for all of us. There's no reason the rest of us should have to turn our brains off and rely on hearsay from other people and anonymous people in order to justify believing something.
And were miracles...
I think it's interesting, though, that what you have is the Catholic Church for 2,000 years has maintained has passed on the information from Jesus and actually from before him.
Have they? How accurate is it? Do we have some way of testing? That's the whole point. We know that the church has existed, and we know that they've portrayed these ideas, although they've changed their minds on some things that they evidently invented, like limbo or whatever. But what we don't know is how accurate is the information that they've passed on relative to what actually happened. And then there's still, as I pointed out at the very beginning, the secondary question of, is it actually true? The fact that a group of people have believed something fervently for a long time and passed it on is irrelevant, because the truth of a claim isn't impacted in any way by the number of people who believe it or how strongly they believe it. It's rooted in actual evidence, and there simply isn't enough to accept. I mean, these are big claims, and given some of the claims that the church and other Christian religious organizations have made that we know are false, the things about the age of the universe and stuff. I think the record is 0 confirmed supernatural events on theirs and hundreds of disconfirmed claims by them. And so my bet at this point is that they're probably wrong about more, and until I have evidence for what they're actually correct about, I don't have any good reason to believe them.
Oh, when it comes down to
what you're saying sounds very good. I think that is not correct. There are lots of miracles that hold up, And but that's really a whole different thing. I think the miracles that Christ performed in the recorded in the Bible are amazing things, turning water to wine. And
well, sure, they're amazing, but did they happen? Again, when it comes down to miracle claims, I keep thinking about, the Roman general and the eagle and all of these things that people believed back then. I mean, yes, we hear about turning water into wine. We hear about walking on water. We hear about all
I realize that.
Yeah.
You know what bothers me is I look at my watch, and I could tell you how that happened to come about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you would tell me, no. A watchmaker made it.
Oh.
Now, you look at the incredible laws that run this universe, and they're very specific. If they were changed to just a touch, we wouldn't be here.
You understand that they are...
Wait, I'm not finished.
Okay.
All right, fine.
And how can you look at these magnificent laws and say that there wasn't a lawgiver behind them? I mean,
because there's no evidence that that's the way the universe works.
You look at a watch. I'd just like to finish this one sentence. You look at a watch and you say a watchmaker made it. How come you can't look at the laws of the universe and say they came about by a lawgiver?
Faith, on the watchmaker analogy, okay, let's follow this through.
Yeah.
You're walking, you find a watch on the beach.
Yeah.
You say, this must have been designed.
Mm-hmm.
How is it stand? Well, hold it. Wait, whoa.
Hang on.
You didn't want us to interrupt you. It's my turn now. Okay.
We'll get there. She's got an oar. But
well, I just want to clarify what I'm saying. It's just like if you looked at Stonehenge, you know that was...
Yeah, we got it. Okay.
We understand. We've been doing this for years.
We understand what you mean. Okay.
Okay.
So, in order to determine
I've understood it for years too. So
in order to understand, in order to determine that you think it was designed, what are you comparing it to?
See, we recognize design by comparing it to things that are undesigned. And if you believe that God created everything, then you can't possibly walk along a beach, pick up a watch, and say this is designed, because in your world, you're walking on a universe of watches, on a beach of watches, and picking up one watch and saying, oh, this is clearly designed, when you think everything was designed. And the truth is, we don't recognize design by complexity. We recognize design because there is evidence for design and no evidence of something naturally occurring like that. And if we came across evidence that watches were naturally occurring, we'd be in a pickle. But we know that watches are designed because we already know the process by which watches were designed. If you walked onto another planet and were walking around and you found something, how could you tell whether or not it was designed if you have no knowledge of that civilization or if there was a civilization? And the answer is you would have to contrast it to something. Something designed is contrasted against something that's not designed.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a frame of reference.
So what are you comparing it to?
I really am not following you.
In your model, God designed everything, correct?
He started out the universe with the laws of the universe. Yeah.
So even the grain of sand, God designed, right?
Well, I mean,
God didn't design grains of sand?
I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, it's a question. Doesn't matter where I'm going.
Yeah.
Did God design grains of sand?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you find a watch on a beach, you have two designed things sitting there. You haven't demonstrated any mechanism for how you determined the difference. The reason this watchmaker analogy has had so much traction among apologists is because people intuitively think that they recognize design. Oh, look, it's Mount Rushmore. Clearly that was designed. Oh, look, it's a watch. Clearly it was designed. What you don't seem to understand is that you know that those things are designed because you have mountains and mountains of evidence for the design. And if instead you point to human beings and say, oh, they're designed, you actually need some evidence that human beings are designed, because all of the available evidence points to the conclusion that humans are naturally occurring. We have a mechanism for reproduction. We have a long history throughout, from the beginning to now, of how humans evolved. There's nothing there about design.
And you have to, in order to say that the universe is designed, you need to have a frame of reference. To say that anything is designed, well, what in your mind would a non-God designed universe look like?
Yeah, we got no universes to compare it to.
Yeah, I mean, if our universe was not designed by God, what do you think it would look like? Describe it. How would it function?
You guys are really something. And I must tell
Thanks.
you, it's really not fair. You have 2 against 1 here, you know.
You know, it's about the arguments, not the numbers.
No,
right?
I know.
We also have science against fallacy.
Your 2 minds are, and I just want my 1 mind, and you have your 2. You know, you guys are. It's a 2 against 1, which is really not fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I enjoy listening to your shows, and and it's very very thought provoking.
Well, thanks,
Okay.
Faith. Why don't you
Thank
go
you.
find 2 friends, and I'll let you go 3 against 1 with me someday.
That's fair.
That sounds wonderful.
Great.
Okay, great. Take care. Happy New Year.
Happy
long.
New Year,
Take
Faith.
care,
Thank
Faith.
you.
Yeah. What would a non-God designed universe look like?
That's the thing. You know, when I talked, it was probably rather snarky of me to say that. Oh, we've been doing this for years.
Well, I mean,
because that's irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, it's just that these are extremely common arguments that
Yes.
we hear, and so it's
and these are not just common arguments.
Yeah.
These are the basic common arguments. And this, you know, Ray Comfort would use the a building has a builder, and a painting has a painter. Therefore, creation has a creator. Whoops! Stop. Why did you call it creation?
Yeah.
That's a cheat. Of course, a creation has a creator, but you haven't demonstrated that the universe is a creation.
Yes.
And the reason that you know that a building has a builder is because there's no evidence for buildings naturally occurring, and tons of evidence for buildings being designed and built. And the same true for painting. If you found just splotches of paint on the ground, or splotches of color, I guess, on the ground, do you get to call it a painting?
No, Jackson Pollock would. Sorry.
Given Jackson Pollock as an example, what do you get to call a painting? Oh, well, it looks like a human. Okay. Well, it's so clear. I mean, the Mona Lisa couldn't just accidentally happen. Well, I agree that it's incredibly unlikely, but the reason we know is because we know how these things work.
Yeah.
We've investigated them. We've
Simplicity
constructed
is
them.
a greater evidence of design, actually, than complexity.
But
But
simplicity is the hallmark of design, not complexity, which is another thing they get back.
But before we move on, 2 basic mistakes being made here. Don't make the basic mistake of thinking the laws of the universe are descriptive, not proscriptive.
Right.
And secondly, don't confuse design with order.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental, that's the foundational error that Christian apologists make when they give us the argument that Faith made.
Yeah, and-
Confusing design, which has a mind and an intent behind it, with order, which is entailed by, that's the nature of it, that's ontological, it's just the nature of existence itself, order.
And when Martin
has to
talks
be a
about the
thing.
laws of the universe being descriptive, one of the things that I would have asked Faith is, let's say the laws of the universe, or the universal constants, or the way the universe worked, were slightly different, and we couldn't possibly be here. How do you know that there wouldn't be some other thinking being sitting there going, wow, this is just preposterous that this universe could have happened entirely by accident, it's fit for me. Douglas Adams has my favorite take
the puddle.
on that with the puddle, which is at wiki.ironchariots.org.
It is, yeah.